Picture a world where the greatest temple ever built still stands in Jerusalem, where one kingdom rules from India to Egypt, and where humanity discovered the secrets of the universe 3,000 years ago. Imagine if the wisest man who ever lived never turned away from God, never fell to temptation, and never brought destruction upon his people. What if King Solomon remained faithful until his last breath? What if everything you think you know about history is wrong? Welcome to our channel, where we explore forbidden questions and hidden truths of history, religion, and the unknown. If you love journeys that challenge what you thought you knew, make sure to join us, because today's story may change the way you see everything. Let me take you back to ancient Jerusalem, where gold flows like water and wisdom shines brighter than the sun itself. Chapter 1. The wisest king who ever lived. King Solomon sits on his throne of ivory and gold, his eyes holding knowledge that no human mind should possess. God himself appeared to this young king in a dream, offering him anything his heart desired. While others would have asked for wealth or power, Solomon asked for wisdom to rule his people well. And God was so pleased with this request that he gave Solomon not just wisdom, but riches and honor beyond imagination. The temple Solomon built was a wonder that made the world stop and stare. Its walls were covered in pure gold, its pillars carved from the finest cedar, and its beauty was so great that even the Queen of Sheba traveled 1,000 miles just to see it with her own eyes. When she arrived, she brought gifts of gold and spices, but she left with something far more valuable: the knowledge that she had met the wisest man who would ever live. Nations from across the known world sent their kings to seek Solomon's advice. They came with their hardest questions, their most difficult problems, and their deepest mysteries. And Solomon answered them all. His wisdom was like a light that could pierce through any darkness, a key that could unlock any secret. But with great blessing comes great temptation. Solomon's fame brought him marriage offers from every kingdom on earth. 700 wives and 300 concubines filled his palace, and with each new wife came her gods, her customs, and her whispered suggestions in the dark of night. The stage was set for a choice that would echo through all of history. Chapter 2. The Golden Kingdom's Dark Shadow. Under Solomon's rule, Israel became the richest nation the world had ever seen. Silver was so common that it was worth nothing in Jerusalem. The king's merchant ships sailed to distant lands and returned loaded with gold, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Every 3 years, they brought enough treasure to make other kingdoms weep with envy. Peace covered the land like a warm blanket. From Dan to Beersheba, every man sat under his own vine and fig tree, afraid of nothing. No enemy dared attack Israel, because they knew that Solomon's wisdom extended to warfare as well. His strategies were perfect, his preparations complete, and his alliances unbreakable. But in the shadows of the palace, foreign princesses whispered to their husband about their homeland gods. They spoke of Ashtoreth, the goddess of love, and Chemosh, the god of victory. They built small shrines in secret corners, offering incense to statues with jeweled eyes and golden arms. Solomon knew what was happening. His wisdom showed him the path these small compromises would lead down. He could see the future stretching out before him, a kingdom divided, a temple destroyed, and his people scattered like leaves in the wind. The choice lay before him like 2 roads in the wilderness. In our world's history, Solomon chose the path of compromise. But what if he had chosen differently? Chapter 3. The Crossroads of Eternity. The moment arrived on a night when the moon hung full over Jerusalem. Solomon stood in his palace, surrounded by the altars his foreign wives had built to their gods. Smoke rose from offerings to Molech and Chemosh, filling the air with the smell of betrayal against the God who had blessed him beyond measure. In our timeline, this was the night Solomon's heart turned away from the Lord. But in this other world, something different happened. Solomon looked at those foreign altars and felt not desire, but disgust. He remembered the dream where God had spoken to him, the moment when divine wisdom had filled his mind, and the promise that his kingdom would last forever if he remained faithful. Enough! Solomon's voice echoed through the palace like thunder. He called his guards and commanded them to destroy every foreign altar, to break every idol into dust, and to burn every shrine to false gods. His foreign wives wept and pleaded, but Solomon's heart was firm as stone. "I will serve the Lord alone," he declared, "and my kingdom will do the same." That very night, fire from heaven fell upon the temple, visible to every person in Jerusalem. It was a sign that God was pleased with Solomon's choice. The consequences of this single decision would reshape the destiny of every human soul who would ever live. Chapter 4. The Kingdom That Never Divides. Years passed, and Solomon grew old, but his wisdom never dimmed. When death finally came for him, he passed peacefully in his bed, surrounded by his son Rehoboam and the elders of Israel. There were no angry words, no threats of rebellion, and no prophecies of doom. Because Solomon had remained faithful, God's promise to preserve his kingdom remained in force. Rehoboam became king not of a nation on the edge of civil war, but of the mightiest empire on earth. The 12 tribes remained united under one crown, one law, and one God. There was no need for Jeroboam to rebel, because there was no injustice to rebel against. The kingdom that David had built and Solomon had perfected continued to grow stronger with each passing year. From the great river Euphrates to the borders of Egypt, one flag flew and one king ruled. The tribute that flowed into Jerusalem from vassal nations was so great that new treasuries had to be built just to hold it all. But more important than gold was the unity of God's people, unbroken and unshakable. Other nations looked at Israel and saw not just military power, but something they had never seen before, a kingdom governed by divine wisdom, where justice flowed like a river and peace covered the land like morning dew. Chapter 5. The Temple That Never Falls. Centuries passed, and still the temple stood. When Nebuchadnezzar's armies marched toward Jerusalem, they found their weapons turning to dust in their hands. When Roman legions approached the holy city, plagues struck their camps until they fled in terror. The temple that Solomon built became not just a building, but a fortress protected by the hand of God himself. Generation after generation of priests served in its courts. The morning and evening sacrifices never ceased, the lamps never went out, and the Ark of the Covenant remained safe in the Holy of Holies. Pilgrims came from every corner of the world to worship at the temple, bringing gifts and leaving with hearts full of wonder. The temple grew larger with each century, as new courts were added and new chambers built. But its heart remained the same, the place where heaven touched earth, where God's presence dwelt among his people. Kings and emperors bowed down in its courts, admitting that their power was nothing compared to the might of Israel's God. Even today, in this other world, the temple still stands. Its golden walls still gleam in the morning sun. Its altars still burn with holy fire, and its courts still echo with songs of praise. It has become the center of the world, the place where all nations come to seek the face of the living God. Chapter 6: The religion that conquered the world. Without the destruction of the temple and the scattering of God's people, Judaism never became a minority faith struggling to survive. Instead, it became the light that drew all nations to itself. Kings and philosophers traveled to Jerusalem not as conquerors, but as students, eager to learn the wisdom that had made Israel great. Alexander the Great himself knelt before Solomon's successor, acknowledging that military conquest was nothing compared to the power of divine truth. The Greek gods were abandoned as their followers discovered the reality of the one true God. Philosophy gave way to revelation, and human wisdom bowed before divine knowledge. Rome never needed to become Christian, because Rome became Jewish. The emperors wore prayer shawls beneath their purple robes and studied Torah in the halls where they once worshipped Jupiter and Mars. The entire Mediterranean world gradually embraced the faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Without persecution to scatter them, without suffering to refine them, God's people remained in their homeland and became the teachers of the world. Every question about law, ethics, and the meaning of life was brought to Jerusalem for answer. The city that had once been just another ancient capital became the heart of human civilization itself. Chapter 7: The Messiah Who Never Came. In a world where Israel never suffered, never fell, and never needed rescue from foreign oppression, the prophecies about a coming Messiah took on entirely different meanings. Some scholars in this alternate timeline believe that Jesus never came at all, because there was no need for a suffering Savior in a world blessed by continuous divine favor. Others suggest that he came, but not as a crucified Redeemer. Instead, he appeared as a teacher and healer, working alongside the priests of Solomon's eternal temple to spread God's kingdom not through sacrifice, but through demonstration of divine power. In this world, Christianity never separated from Judaism, because there was no conflict to create division. Still others believe that the Messianic age simply dawned gradually, as the wisdom of Solomon's kingdom slowly transformed the entire world into the paradise that God had always intended. Instead of waiting for a future kingdom, humanity was already living in it, ruled by kings who sought God's will and governed by laws written by divine wisdom. The question of salvation itself became different in a world where humanity had never truly fallen away from God's presence. Instead of redemption from sin, the focus became elevation to ever greater levels of spiritual understanding and cosmic responsibility. Chapter 8: The Science Born from Sacred Wisdom. The wisdom that God gave to Solomon was not just about governing people or settling disputes. It included deep knowledge about the natural world, the movements of the stars, and the hidden forces that shape reality itself. In our timeline, this knowledge was lost when the kingdom fell. But in the world where Solomon remained faithful, this wisdom was preserved and built upon for thousands of years. By the time our world was struggling through the Dark Ages, Solomon's descendants had already unlocked the secrets of mathematics that we call advanced physics. They understood the relationship between matter and energy, the nature of time and space, and the principles that govern life itself. Their libraries contained formulas that our greatest scientists are only now beginning to discover. Medicine in this world advanced at breathtaking speed. Diseases that plagued other nations were unknown in Israel, not because of better hygiene alone, but because the priests understood the connection between spiritual and physical health. They could heal with touch, cure with words, and prevent illness through practices that seemed like magic to outsiders. Astronomy became a sacred science, as Solomon's successors mapped not just the movements of planets and stars, but the spiritual forces that guided them. They built instruments that could predict eclipses centuries in advance and calculate the positions of celestial bodies with perfect accuracy. Chapter 9. The Islamic Question. In Arabia, a merchant named Muhammad received visions that would normally have founded one of the world's great religions. But in a world where monotheism had already conquered most of the known world through Israel's influence, his message took on a different character. Instead of founding a separate faith, Muhammad became a reformer within the existing Abrahamic tradition. The Quran that emerged in this timeline acknowledged the continuous revelation flowing from Jerusalem's eternal temple. Instead of replacing Judaism and Christianity, Islam became their completion, adding Arabian wisdom to Jewish law and preparing the way for the final unification of all Abraham's children under one faith. Mecca remained a holy city, but it pointed toward Jerusalem as the ultimate destination of pilgrimage. The Kaaba became not a rival to Solomon's temple, but a gateway that prepared hearts for the greater revelation waiting in the Holy Land. Muhammad himself made the journey to Jerusalem and was welcomed as a brother prophet by the descendants of Solomon. The result was not three competing religions fighting over the same lands, but one unified faith expressed through different cultural traditions. Jewish, Christian, and Islamic practices blended into a single stream of worship that flowed toward the one God who had chosen Jerusalem as his dwelling place among humanity. Chapter 10. The Europe that never was. Without the rise of Christianity as a separate religion, Europe's history unfolded in completely different ways. Roman civilization never fell because it was strengthened and purified by the wisdom flowing from Jerusalem. The barbarian tribes of Germania and Gaul were converted not by missionaries preaching a crucified savior, but by traders demonstrating the practical benefits of living according to divine law. The Dark Ages never came, because the light of knowledge was never extinguished. Greek philosophy merged with Hebrew wisdom to create new schools of thought that advanced human understanding at unprecedented speed. The Renaissance happened 1,000 years early, driven not by rediscovering ancient texts, but by continuous development of living traditions. Vikings left their longships to become students in Jerusalem's academies. Celtic Druids abandoned their groves to study in Solomon's libraries. The Gothic cathedrals were never built, because the people who would have built them made pilgrimage instead to the temple that surpassed any human architecture. Universities sprouted across Europe, but they were all branches of the great center of learning in Jerusalem. Students came from Britain and Spain, from Russia and Italy, all seeking the wisdom that had made Israel the wonder of the world. Europe became not Christendom, but an extension of the eternal kingdom that had never fallen. Chapter 11. The Hidden Scrolls of Eternal Wisdom. Deep beneath Solomon's temple, in chambers that few have ever seen, ancient scrolls contain knowledge that was deemed too powerful for ordinary minds. These texts, written in Solomon's own hand under divine inspiration, describe the fundamental forces that shape reality itself. They contain formulas for manipulating matter and energy, instructions for extending human life, and blueprints for technologies that seem like magic. In our world, these scrolls were lost when the temple was destroyed. But in the timeline where Solomon remained faithful, they were preserved, and their secrets gradually revealed to each generation as humanity grew wise enough to handle them. The result was scientific advancement that made our current technology look like children's toys. Anti-gravity devices lifted the massive stones used in temple construction. Crystals powered by harmonized sound provided unlimited clean energy. Healing chambers used focused light and sound to repair damaged bodies at the cellular level. Transportation systems moved people and goods across vast distances instantly, using principles that our physicists are only beginning to theorize. But the most profound secrets dealt not with physical technology, but with consciousness itself. The scrolls contained instructions for expanding human awareness, for communicating across any distance, and for accessing knowledge stored in the fabric of reality itself. These were the true treasures of Solomon's wisdom. Chapter 12. The Gnostic Connection. Secret Christian texts speak of Jesus spending years in the East, learning wisdom from unknown teachers. In our alternate timeline, these missing years become clear. The young Jesus traveled to Jerusalem and studied directly under the priests who preserved Solomon's traditions. The meeting between messianic calling and Solomonic wisdom created something unprecedented in human history. Instead of opposing each other, Jewish temple worship and Christian revelation blended into a unified path of spiritual advancement. Jesus did not come to replace the law of Moses, but to fulfill it by demonstrating its deepest possibilities. The miracles he performed were not violations of natural law, but applications of the advanced science preserved in Solomon's secret texts. The disciples who learned from this synthesis of wisdom became teachers of a new kind of spirituality, one that combined perfect faithfulness to divine law with unlimited compassion for human weakness. They established schools throughout the Roman Empire where students could learn both practical wisdom and mystical insight. The result was Christianity that never separated from its Jewish roots, Judaism that never rejected its messianic fulfillment, and a unified faith that drew on the deepest wisdom of both traditions. This synthesis became the foundation for a new stage of human evolution. Chapter 13. The Kabbalah that conquered science. Jewish mystical traditions teach that the universe itself is constructed according to principles that can be understood and applied by those with sufficient wisdom. In our timeline where Solomon's knowledge was preserved, these mystical insights developed into a sophisticated science that bridged the gap between spirit and matter, thousands of years before modern physics began to discover the same truths. The Tree of Life became not just a symbol, but a working diagram of how consciousness creates reality. The Hebrew letters were understood as fundamental forces that shape matter and energy. Meditation techniques allowed practitioners to perceive and manipulate the basic structures of existence itself. By the time our world was discovering electricity, Solomon's heirs were already working with forces that modern science cannot even name. They had learned to harmonize human consciousness with cosmic rhythms, to heal through directed intention, and to manifest physical changes through spiritual practice. The greatest Kabbalists became living bridges between heaven and earth, able to access unlimited knowledge and channel unlimited power. But they used these abilities not for personal gain, but to serve the divine plan for human development. They became the hidden guides who steered civilization toward its highest destiny. Chapter 14. The Islamic Secrets. Sufi mystics have always claimed that their deepest practices came from sources older than Islam itself. In the world where Solomon never fell, these claims prove to be literally true. The whirling dances, the breathing techniques, and the methods of achieving mystical union all trace back to practices developed in Solomon's temple for accessing divine wisdom. When Muhammad received his revelations in this alternate timeline, he recognized immediately that he was being given pieces of a larger pattern that was already being worked out in Jerusalem. The 5 daily prayers aligned with temple worship schedules. The pilgrimage to Mecca became preparation for the greater pilgrimage to the eternal temple. Sufi orders established schools throughout the Islamic world, where students could learn the ancient techniques for expanding consciousness and achieving direct knowledge of divine reality. These schools became centers of scientific and philosophical advancement, as mystics applied their spiritual insights to understanding the natural world. The result was an Islam that never opposed Judaism or Christianity, but recognized them as earlier stages of the same divine revelation. All 3 faiths became facets of a single jewel, each reflecting the same light from different angles and enriching the others through their unique perspectives. Chapter 15: The Vatican's Forbidden Archives. Deep in the secret libraries of the Vatican, documents exist that few have ever seen. These texts, written by scholars who had access to sources that were later suppressed, describe alternate histories where Solomon never fell and Christianity developed along completely different lines. The church hierarchy has kept these documents hidden because they challenge fundamental assumptions about Christian origins. One manuscript describes a world where Jesus studied in Jerusalem and learned the deepest secrets of Solomon's wisdom. Another contains detailed maps of temple complexes that supposedly never existed, but which match archaeological discoveries that have never been made public. A third presents theological arguments for a Christianity that never separated from Judaism. The most disturbing documents suggest that our current timeline is not the original one, but a deviation from a divine plan that was meant to unfold differently. They describe reality as a kind of cosmic experiment where different possibilities are tested, and they hint that the correct timeline, the one where Solomon remained faithful, still exists parallel to our own. Vatican astronomers have reportedly detected anomalies in distant starlight that suggest the existence of alternate realities. These observations are classified at the highest levels because they provide physical evidence for the claims made in the hidden manuscripts. Chapter 16: The Technology We Lost. Modern archaeologists working in the Middle East have discovered artifacts that should not exist. Stone blocks cut with laser-like precision, metal alloys that our technology cannot duplicate, electronic circuits embedded in objects that are thousands of years old. Most of these discoveries are quickly classified and removed from public view. In the timeline where Solomon's kingdom never fell, these technologies developed continuously for 3,000 years. By now, that civilization would possess capabilities that make our most advanced science fiction look primitive. They would have solved energy and environmental problems millennia ago. They would have eliminated disease, extended human life indefinitely, and established contact with intelligences throughout the universe. The most advanced technologies in that world operate not through mechanical principles, but through consciousness itself. Vehicles powered by focused intention, communication systems that work through quantum entanglement of minds, healing devices that repair damage by harmonizing the patient's energy field with divine patterns. But perhaps the most significant difference is in their approach to knowledge itself. Instead of viewing science and spirituality as separate domains, they develop them as aspects of a single understanding. Every technological advancement served spiritual evolution, and every spiritual insight found practical application. Chapter 17: The Political Revolution. In a world shaped by Solomon's wisdom, rather than human ambition, the very nature of government transformed. Instead of democracy based on majority rule or aristocracy based on inherited power, nations developed systems based on demonstrated wisdom and spiritual maturity. Leaders were chosen not by popularity or birth, but by their ability to perceive divine will and translate it into practical policy. The result was governance that balanced individual freedom with collective responsibility in ways that our political philosophers can barely imagine. Laws were not compromises between competing interests, but expressions of universal principles that served everyone's highest good. Justice was not punishment, but restoration of harmony between all parties. International relations operated according to the same principles. Instead of nations competing for resources and territory, they collaborated to develop the Earth's potential for supporting all life. Wars became impossible because conflicts were resolved at their root through application of wisdom rather than force. The economic system that emerged prioritized human development over material accumulation. Wealth existed to enable spiritual advancement, not as an end in itself. Everyone had access to everything they needed for growth, while no one accumulated more than they could use constructively. Chapter 18: The Faith That Heals the World. In our world, religious differences have caused countless wars and untold suffering. But in the timeline where Solomon never fell, all major faiths trace back to a single source of divine wisdom. Instead of competing religions claiming exclusive truth, humanity developed complementary spiritual approaches, all rooted in the same fundamental understanding. Jewish practices provided the foundation of law and ethical behavior. Christian insights offered the model of divine love expressed through human service. Islamic disciplines contributed techniques for surrendering personal will to cosmic purpose. Eastern traditions shared methods for expanding consciousness beyond ordinary limitations. The result was not a single uniform religion, but a symphony of spiritual approaches that enriched each other through their diversity. People could follow the path that suited their temperament and culture, while recognizing the validity of other approaches. Religious wars became impossible because there were no fundamental conflicts to fight about. This spiritual unity became the foundation for healing not just human conflicts, but humanity's relationship with the earth itself. Environmental destruction ceased when people recognized the planet as God's temple. Species extinction ended when every form of life was seen as part of the divine creation that humans were called to protect. Chapter 19: The Question That Changes Everything. If one person's choice could have prevented millennia of suffering, what does that tell us about the power of individual decisions? If Solomon's faithfulness could have saved the world from war, disease, and spiritual confusion, then every choice we make carries potentially cosmic consequences. Are we living in the wrong timeline because someone, somewhere, made the wrong decision? Think about the moments in your own life when you stood at crossroads similar to Solomon's, when temptation whispered that small compromises wouldn't matter, when you had to choose between immediate pleasure and long-term faithfulness, when you decided whether to trust divine guidance or rely on human wisdom alone. What if those moments were more important than you realized? What if your choices are helping to determine which timeline humanity moves toward? What if the world of peace and wisdom that could have emerged from Solomon's faithfulness is still possible, still waiting for enough people to make the same choice he should have made? The story of what might have been is also a prophecy of what still could be. The wisdom that was lost can be rediscovered. The unity that was broken can be restored. The paradise that was forfeited can still be claimed by those who have the courage to choose faithfulness over compromise. Chapter 20. The secret that threatens reality. But here is the secret that changes everything. What if Solomon never actually fell at all? What if the history we have been taught is a carefully constructed lie designed to hide the truth that the unified kingdom, the eternal temple, and the civilization built on divine wisdom still exist, hidden in plain sight? Ancient texts speak of parallel realities, of timelines that branch and merge, of possibilities that exist simultaneously in different dimensions. Modern physics confirms that reality is far stranger than our everyday experience suggests. Quantum mechanics demonstrates that observation itself shapes what becomes real. What if our timeline, the one filled with division, conflict, and spiritual confusion, is the shadow reality, while the true world, where Solomon remained faithful, continues to exist in a parallel dimension? What if the suffering and chaos of our world are the result of living in a deviation from the original divine plan? Evidence exists, hidden in classified archives and suppressed archaeological sites, suggesting that contact between these parallel realities is possible. Some claim that certain individuals have crossed between worlds, bringing back knowledge and technologies that should not exist. Others suggest that the reality we think we know is beginning to merge with the true timeline. The question is not what if Solomon never fell. It is what if he never fell, and someone is working very hard to make sure you never find out. The unified kingdom may still exist, the eternal temple may still stand, and the wisdom that could save our world may be waiting for someone brave enough to seek it out. Are you ready to discover which reality is true?